can only be attributable to human error.
You're entering Paranormal.
He meddled in things that you people. He meddled in
Slug.
things. He meddled in things.
Where will we go next? It's a phantom from another time.
No one, Mr. Mulder.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
That is one big pile of shit.
Hello, I'm Alex Daikaiju.
I'm Jasmine with
And I'm Eli Watson.
And we are
Cryptid
Campfire.
Woohoo! Hey everyone, and welcome back to Cryptid Campfire. If you've been following along with us, we've been on the world tour, rocking around.
the Christmas tree. Just kidding.
Oh yeah. Oh, Christmas is coming up. It's already October. And well, it's been kind of wild, kind of crazy. Met some weird wild animals. And we find ourselves today in the deepest, darkest parts of Africa. And we're going to be talking about the one, the only, the Kangamato.
That's not what I thought we were talking about.
Huh? Isn't today October 14th?
No.
We're meeting today. I'm all set. Or no. Yeah, we've been so traveling around the world. I'm so jet lagged. I'm a week ahead. No.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Alex. But today we're talking about the Nandi Bear.
Whoa. Well, in today's episode, I'm going to be following along with the audience because I have no idea.
Yeah, full disclosure, there was a misunderstanding about what we'd be recording this week. So Alex, like he said, is a week ahead. We'll be doing the Kangamato next week. So he's already got his research done for that one. But he lacks research on what we're actually talking about today, which Eli and I researched, which is the Nandi Bear.
Yeah. So tell me about it. What is it?
Well, you were still correct in talking about the fact that we're in Africa. We're in Western Kenya for this creature. It's named the Nandi Bear after Western Kenya's Nandi County, which is where it's most frequently reported.
Yes. Nandi is also a language.
Mm-hmm. And a people.
And a people. It's a lot of things. Nandi. But
it
is it a bear?
Diverse adjective.
It is. It's very diverse. But the question we're asking today is it a bear?
That is the question.
I don't know. Could be. We'll get into it.
We will.
Yeah. Come along and see.
Yeah. Let's start with the description. Alex, based off of the name, what do you think the Nandi Bear looks like? This will be interesting for me to hear.
Yeah. Okay. So based off the name, I'm assuming it's probably about 10 feet tall, probably bright blue with white stripes that run up and down its back. Face, I assume like a koala, maybe with some tusks to kind of add that scary, feeling. So I'm ready to talk about this monstrosity because there's little bears and there's mega bears, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on that.
Well, actually couldn't be further from a description that is truly attributed to the Nandi Bear. So let me share it with you guys. Yeah. I guess it's not that far off. It's kind of far off. It's definitely not blue, but so first off, one of my favorite things that I came across when researching this cryptid was the fact that most article headlines use the adjective brain eating. So
yes.
That's the main kind of element of this description is, according to legend, the beast eats only the brains of its victims, which can be both human and animal. But when we're talking about physical description, like key attributes, it resembles a powerfully built, upright, tree-climbing hyena between 4 and 6 feet tall. So high front shoulders, sloping back, with shorter, sleeker hindquarters, which sometimes can be the reason that people report that it walks on two legs. It's not actually walking on its two hind legs. It just looks like it is because it's so tall in the front. Thick, dark, reddish brown or brown hair or fur, and a thick mane, large teeth, long pointed head, and short snout, which seems contradictory to me to have, but I guess it's not impossible to have a long head but a short snout. Said to be similar to that of the American brown bear. Some sightings claim that it has a short tail, while most claim the animal has no tail. And it is known among the Nandi by many names, depending on the region that it's sighted in. So that's what I got for physical description. Did I miss anything? Did I misquote anything? Did you have anything different, Eli?
No, but I will say the dimensions are pretty interesting, like 4 to 6 feet tall and stuff, because I didn't get anything like that from any of the witness reports. So intriguing, but we'll dig in, shall we?
We should.
I had a quick question.
For sure.
Because I'm not.
Please save all questions till the end, please.
Leave meeting. So you're saying it's called the Nandi Bear, but it looks more like a hyena. This might be a silly question, but are there any bears even in Africa?
Oh,
the short answer is no, but the long answer is maybe, and we'll get into that. And also, there's quite a few things about the hyena thing that we'll get into, but anyway.
Okay. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Cool. So just a couple general statements about like when these sightings started before we get into more specific stories. English colonists in the Nandi region of Kenya relayed reports of an apparent bear-like beast that the locals spoke of with great fear. There was a scattering of eyewitness accounts making the rounds in the first decades of the 1900s. That's kind of the time period that we're going to live in for this episode, is the early 1900s. And then workers on the major railways that were built in the African jungle in the early 1900s also reported sightings happening mostly at the hours of dusk. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of general time of day and region and year for these stories.
Yes. And so I actually want to share something before we get into some of the sightings, is because obviously we call it the Nandi Bear, and we call it that because it is in the Nandi area, right?
Yes.
But what do the natives call it? Because they don't call it the Nandi Bear, they call it chemoset or chemosit, something like that. I don't speak Nandi, so I don't know how to pronounce it. But anyways, I have a breakdown of the word from linguist and historian G.W.B. Huntingford, who in 1927 writes in the Journal of the Royal Anthropological Institute of Great Britain and Ireland. He breaks down the word chemoset or chemosit as CHE is a prefix meaning one who is doing an action, mos meaning to strike. So the name chemosit means the one that strikes. Not only this, it gets a little bit more complicated, but chemosit is in reference, the one name is in reference to two things. Number one, being a devil with, and stay with me here, 9 butts in one leg.
Whoa.
And it
Sounds thick.
Devilishly thick.
Oh, and it's seen at night because its mouth is full of fire.
Oh, spitting straight fire, eh?
Spitting straight fire. Number 2 is an animal that is larger than a hyena, has long red hair, and leaves long-footed tracks. And there's a debate among the Nandi people whether it resembles a hyena or a gorilla more. Victims of the chemosit are always found scalped, which I'll come back to probably towards the end of the podcast.
Whoa.
Yeah. So maybe that's where the brain eating aspect comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't get no reports of it actually eating brains, but
Interesting. Because I did. The main story kind of being that there was like some cattle mutilations in 1919 among the Lumbwa. There was a herd of either 57 or 67. There's discrepancy on the actual number, but these goats over a 10-day span were found with their brains ripped out and everything else just left behind. I don't know any other facts on that, but there is the claim that that was sort of a brain buffet.
Whoa, brain buffet.
goats, you say?
Goats, I say.
Chupacabra? Question mark?
Just suck the brains right out of their skulls.
Yeah. Well, it didn't suck all the brains, so therefore it couldn't be a chupacabra. It left a little bit in there.
It wasn't as thorough as the Egyptians when they carved out the brain of their mummies.
Oof. You want to talk about the mummy? I'll talk about the mummy for days, man.
Hey, welcome to the Mummy-a-thon. We're talking about the mummy for days.
Dude, I could have a podcast about the mummy. I could have a podcast about Brendan Fraser, but that's topic of discussion for another day. I won't derail this episode just to talk about those things, but I will say we went to Halloween Horror Nights and we got to ride the Mummy Returns. What is the ride even called? It's called the Revenge of the Mummy something.
Revenge of the Mummy. I think that's right.
I should know this, but I don't. But it's so
we
fun.
did ride that ride, didn't we?
We did.
Oh yeah, we survived Imhotep. You could say that we made it through Halloween Horror Nights alive.
Hey, yeah, that's where you got that poster.
Yeah, check out this sick poster. If you want to see the full video, I think we're going to drop it soon.
Oh.
Yep. Well, what a great segue to our first sighting. So immediately I'm off to some troubled unmatching dates.
Okay.
And this problem will only compound as the episode goes on. So I have that the first written appearance comes from the Journal of the East Africa and Uganda Natural History Society, particularly from an edition from 1910. However, every sighting that I have that comes from this edition is dated as being after 1910. So we'll get into it. Don't worry about the details.
I never do.
So there's a man named C.W. Hobley, who is a British settler in western Kenya, who compiled these encounters. So the first one that I have here is supposedly from 1912, but was published in 1910, is a British Major Tolson, who is in the Uasin Gishu, where the Great Rift Valley meets the water systems of Lake Victoria. I hope you guys know where that is, because I don't. He was shaving in his tent at night when I think one of his sons burst into the tent and is like, hey, there's a leopard by the kitchen. So Major Tolson, he's like, what's going on? He rushes outside to see what it is, to see the leopard, but they don't see a leopard. He says that he saw this strange creature that was about 20 inches high, had long hair, bulky stature, no tail, fleeing the scene and into the night. And he made special note that it didn't have a tail because a few days prior to this, a couple of Dutch travelers from the Netherlands passed through and told him that they didn't know that there were bears in Africa. And he responded with, well, there aren't any bears in Africa. And they're like, that's a little strange because our dogs chased a small bear and it was thick set and it made a peculiar moaning cry. So I have another kind of report here, and this, what I got for a year was that it's a year prior to the Major Tolson's sighting. So this would place it in 1911.
Even though it was written about in 1910.
Yeah. I'm
That's
thinking
some time travel stuff, man. That's another episode. I don't know why we're time traveling today.
I think the internet is wrong. So
What? Do you think the internet is wrong? Never.
That's a hefty accusation, sir.
Yeah. A man named Fritz Schindler, who was an engineer working on the Mogadi railway system, states that he found tracks he could not identify, and they followed a cart path through grass. They're rectangular but curved inward in the middle on either side, with 5 oblong toes that ended in short claw marks. Now, famous cryptozoologist Bernard Heuvelmans, there wasn't really cameras back prior to 1910 or even being 1911. So there's no photographs of the tracks, and there certainly isn't any casts of the tracks, but there is a sketch that Fritz Schindler drew. Based off the image that he drew, famous cryptozoologist Bernard Heuvelmans suggested that the tracks were actually caused by a honey badger and that they're just double stepped. So it would have stepped once, and then with its back leg or back foot stepped in it again, which tends to elongate the feet and make it look a little bit different. I know double stepped bear tracks in North America can often look like Bigfoot tracks. So just saying. Could be that. Could be.
I mean,
real.
honey badgers are pretty scary.
Dude, yeah. I was reading a lot about honey badgers, and apparently they've been known to steal food from lions.
Oh yeah.
That's
Honey
crazy.
badgers don't care. They fight cobras and eat them. They'll straight up steal food from lions. I know they steal them from hyenas and any kind of predator they'll run around and try to steal the food from. They'll fight cobras. They're aggressive and unseemly.
Dude, I saw a picture of one eating a porcupine, like after a fight. And this thing had like porcupine needles in its neck, and homie was just like snacking on this thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, bro, you really don't care, do you?
There's the old I guess it'd be old now, the old timey internet meme, honey badger don't give a F. They really, really don't.
Now, Eli, that story you just told, who was the main character in that story again?
A man named Fritz Schindler.
Okay, and he was working on the Mogadi Railway? Okay, cool. I have some more information about people who were working on the Mogadi Railway that I can kind of chime in here with. This supposedly takes place in 1913.
But also written about in 1910.
Sure. They had been reporting being stalked by a monster, these railway workers. And it started with the workers finding these strange tracks that they hadn't seen before. So like Eli said, 5 toes, long heel. I forget, how long did you say the tracks were? Did you give like an inch measurement?
No, I don't have an inch long measurement.
This one says 8.5 inches long. Various workers and locals on the project then began to report having seen the bear-like animal with a mane, long, wicked-looking claws that stood about 6 feet tall and which often stood upright on its hind legs, supposedly. And then the most well-known of these accounts, because there were multiple, was actually given by the head engineer of the project named G.W. Hicks, who actually saw it while moving along on the motor trolley. So you're nodding your head, Eli, so I'm assuming that you have this story as well. So let me know if there's anything contradicting what I'm saying and what you found. So
Sure.
as
Wait,
he traveled,
may I throw one detail in there that I
Yes.
thought was lit?
Lit.
Do you
Sure.
know how fast he was traveling?
No.
He was going a whopping 20 miles an hour, baby.
Ooh. What, in 1912?
1913.
Somewhere in there.
Oh man.
But as he was traveling along, he spotted what he first thought to be a hyena out in the scrub about 50 yards away. But as the trolley drew closer, he could see that it was something different. He would say of his strange encounter, quote, "It was almost on the line when I first saw it, and at that time it had already seen me and was making off at a right angle to the line. As I got closer to the animal, I saw it was not a hyena. At first I saw it nearly broadside on. It then looked about as high as a lion. In color, it was tawny, about like a black maned lion, with very shaggy long hair. It was short and thickest in the body, with high withers, and had a short neck and stumpy nose." Okay, so the stumpy nose is accurate to what I said earlier. It did not turn to look at me, but loped off, running with its forelegs and both hind legs rising at the same time. As I got alongside it, it was about 40 or 50 yards away, and I noticed it was very broad across the rump. It had very
Oh.
short ears and had no tail that I could see. As its hind legs came out of the grass, I noticed the legs were very shaggy, right down to the feet, and that the feet seemed large.
Oof. People be noticing that hind quarter a lot lately in these reports.
Mm-hmm.
Hey man, 9 butts. Gotta
9
make
butts.
room for all that.
Yeah. Whoo.
Could you
There-
imagine finding the scat of that animal and it's 9 turds neatly?
Yeah.
How did we come back to poop? Didn't we talk
This-
about poop in some other one? We
We gotta talk.
talked
It's
about
always
poop
about
in the
poop.
Duendes episode. Oh Lord.
Yeah.
You know, the most shocking thing to me when it comes to traveling the world and coming across so many cryptids and cultures is human feces plays a big part in a lot of human history.
Hey man. It's everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, Nike literally says just do it.
Yeah. I know. So going to this sighting, one of the reasons why it would be strange, because this was about midday that he saw this, it would be strange to see a hyena at this time because hyenas are what is known as crepuscular. Yeah, meaning they're most active at dawn and dusk. So to see one specifically also because they're social animals like most canines are, to see one alone by itself in the middle of the day is quite rare. So priority thinking he probably saw it and was like, that's a little weird, but not impossible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's interesting the tawny coloration that he mentioned. I have another sighting here that I'll get into. I'm going to go back and then forward, back and forth, back and forth. Stick with me. So this comes from District Commissioner NEF Corbett. Do you know this one?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so I forget the name of the river, but he was walking toward the river on his farm when
Siragoy.
Siragoy?
Siragoy River.
I think you're right. It started with an S. So the Siragoy River, which part of it ran through his property, so he was going to go fish in the property, and he stumbles upon a creature. And from what he kind of said is that they surprised each other. So it certainly wasn't expecting to see him there. And so it was like, hey, what are you doing here? But no, it didn't. It instead, it got into the water and swam across the river and then into the bushes on the other side. And the way he described it was that it's a reddish brown, had thick hair, had a slight streak of white in the hindquarters, bigger than a hyena with large ears. He did not get to see the head very clearly, but it was heavily built. He also mentioned that he was not wearing his specs at the time, his glasses. So I'm assuming he was like me in that he was nearsighted, because if he was going to fish without his glasses on, you kind of don't need to see that far away when you're fishing. So he certainly wasn't expecting to see a creature that he would be making a report on. So yeah.
That's the moral of the story, is always have a camera on you, which now with phones we do, and always make sure you have your glasses, because you'll never know when you'll see a 9-butted monster.
Interesting note to add. This apparently happened, like we said, on the Sirgoy River, just below Tolson's farm, which
Yes.
is the person you talked about earlier.
Yeah, the Major Tolson. So in close proximity to whatever Tolson saw. And I want to really mention and focus on, it had reddish brown hair, which tawny, the color tawny I looked up on the Google, is kind of a reddish brown, actually. So the color certainly matches. And the, what is it, thick hair, the thick hair seems to match C.W. Hicks's description as well. Not saying that they're all the same thing, but I'm saying it's pretty interesting that these descriptions do kind of match. And we'll get back to the streak of white on the hindquarters later. But so C.W. Hicks was so moved by his encounter that he went on to look for others who might have seen something similar. And so the first one that I got that he ran into was the son of a Dutchman who had seen it and thought nothing of it because he was new to Kenya and all the animals were new to him. So he just saw it and was like, oh, another weird animal.
Yeah, on a whole list of just things he'd never even encountered or thought could exist.
Probably. But when he was asked to, I guess he pulled out a children's book and compared it to, I think, a North American bear as being the closest thing to what it looked like. That there was nothing, he said there was nothing in any of the field guides of that area that matched the description of what he saw, except for that picture of a bear in a children's book. Yeah. Hicks also spoke to a native trader who claimed to see one while he was on a walking path. He said that it stood up on its hind legs and looked at him before it ran off. Now that is also significant because it was up on its hind legs, but did not run away on its hind legs. And also, he heard tell of a bower who shot one, but no body could be found. And that is the recurring theme for this episode, everyone.
It really is.
Yes.
Did they shoot one?
Carcasses.
A couple people did.
Really?
Supposedly. Yeah. So, and this is interesting. So then, and I'm sure I think we're gonna start getting a little disorganized here, but in 1914, The Lancet, which is a paper from Princeton University, wrote that the Nandi Bear is extremely fierce and kills men and animals. It is also nocturnal and stands on its hind legs and is large. Now, up until this point, as far as I can tell, there's no reports of it killing anybody. And there's no reports of it being nocturnal. But we'll see. I mean, there was only that one Major Tolson sighting, which occurred at night. But again, it was around dinner time, I think. So I don't know. That would match something being crepuscular, wouldn't it?
I think that counts as dusk.
From dusk till dawn, baby.
Yeah.
I will also say that there's a lot of stories of sightings, but not very many stories of attacks. So the whole brain eating thing that we were talking about earlier does really only come from that one story that I found about the goats. But I did find another story about a 6-year-old girl who disappeared from a village in the Wasangishu County, which has been attributed to a Nandi Bear attack, though there's no like it. The only thing that really ties it to the Nandi Bear is the fact that this girl disappeared and they found bloodied thorns on the fence surrounding the village, which suggested that she had been violently pulled through, and this was happening sometime in 1925. So in response, excuse me, the colonial government sent in Captain William Hitchens. I don't think we've talked about him yet, have we? Hitchens? Okay. There's a lot of names to try and keep straight, and a lot of them sound the same or similar. So Hitchens was an officer with the Intelligence and Administrative Services of East Africa. He set out with a hunting dog to try and find this missing girl or figure out, where she went. He didn't find anything the first couple of nights, but on one night he was startled from his sleep by a blood-curdling scream and a commotion outside that was like rustling his tent and like bringing it down. By the time he got untangled from the tent, all he could see was a trail of blood, and the rope that he had used to tether his dog to the hunting pole was still there, but the dog was gone. And the trail had paw prints that were a few times larger than a man's hand or a lion's paw, and showed imprints of claws. So that was his experience. He never saw anything, but the biggest thing that's tying it to a possible Nandi Bear attack is what he heard, which was the scream that he described as the most awful howl I have ever heard, which split the night. The sheer demonic horror of it froze me still. Never have I heard, nor do I ever wish to hear again such a howl. So to me, that's kind of like an outlier experience compared to all of the rest of these sightings and stuff. It's definitely notable because of the strange howl and the disappearance of the girl, which I never found a conclusion to my knowledge. She was never found. That might not be the case, but in the articles I read mentioning this story, there was no real conclusion to her disappearance. I don't know what happened after Hitchens' dog disappeared. I don't know if he continued the investigation or did any more work, or if that's just where it ends.
Oh, I got this, that he followed the tracks and spent a week in the forest, but never found it or his dog.
Or the girl, apparently.
Or the girl.
Oof. You know what's troubling is, apparently the Nandi Bear has said to eat brains, but from what you guys have said, that doesn't come across in any way, let alone if it's attacked anyone, really. So what did scoop out 57 brains of the sheep that night? That's what I'm worried about. No one wants to talk about.
Yeah.
Dude, it's the chupacabra, dog.
Oh, he was on vacation in Africa too.
Hold on 1 second. I have an interesting report here. So this one is not commonly associated with the Nandi Bear, as it comes from a completely different part of Kenya. This comes from eastern Kenya, in a totally different area with different peoples. This is from the Pocomo people. And this also comes from, what was his name? C.W. Hobley. He gets another report here from a British district officer named Mr. Cumberpatch. Not to be confused with Cumberbatch, the famous actor.
Yeah. What's his name? Briar Patch? Brumble Patch or something?
Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah, that's
Cumberbatch. This is Benedict Cumberpatch.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know his first name.
His first name's Smaug.
Smaug. So Mr. Cumberpatch was in the Tana River Delta, and he spoke with 2 German missionaries who went on their way to a village inhabited by the Pocomo people. And they returned very quickly and said that they found the village abandoned. And he thought that they were full of it. He thought that they couldn't find it. And so he was like, hey, I'm going to go check it out and investigate for myself. And he went and found that it was indeed abandoned. But he caught wind somehow that the people of that village moved down the river a ways to a larger settlement where other people were. And so he went down that way and asked them why they left. And they said that the Kodolo had overrun the place. And they described it as a giant baboon, man-sized or larger, walks on 4 legs, but can stand on 2. They are fearless and aggressive. And once it knows what it can get away with, it only escalates. So, you know, that kind of tests the boundaries. If you allow it to cross the boundaries, it just keeps going, encroaching more and more. And essentially that happened to the point to where they just had to leave. And Cumberpatch thought this was an interesting scenario because, 1, these people had legitimately abandoned their village, and 2, the Pocomo people were not known for making stuff up, essentially. So something caused them to flee. I don't know, pretty interesting, but that, again, that will come up later.
So when it comes to sightings, the most recent one I could find comes from a 1998 issue of the Safari magazine, which is an in-flight magazine that some commercial airlines carry for their passengers to read. It's Nairobi based. There was an article written by Gordon Boy, which included details of this Nandi Bear encounter, which took place in February of 1998. So the guy was named Dennis Burnett. He was based temporarily in Kisumu while working on a project for the Nairobi road building firm Isico. He was driving home at night along the Kisumu Road, skirting the base of the Nandi escarpment with his wife Marlene. It was pouring rain when suddenly a large animal stepped out onto the road in front of their car. He said, in that instant, I could have sworn it was a bear. They were lucky enough to get a second look. He said, we stopped the car, and after reversing slowly back to the spot and then directing our brights onto the side for which the beast had seemed to be heading, we saw it again for about 15 seconds passing right in front of us. And it was then, Burnett says, that he and his wife realized that the bear was actually an enormous shaggy hyena, like a striped hyena, only very much bigger. And we, I'm sure, are going to get into a lot of hyena talk towards the end here. But as far as like most recent sightings, that was kind of the most recent one that I could find. Now, what we're about to talk about, because like there's people who have claimed to have hunted it. Nobody's ever caught it. There's been plenty of claims that it's been shot and killed, but those carcasses always seem to disappear. There was one story that had been killed by a charging rhino. There was another story that said it was trapped in a hut that burned down. And then there were people that claimed, you know, tribesmen hunted it down. So what I'm gathering is that the Nandi Bear might be like a species that we're dealing with, not so much a one original cryptid creature, but more so an undiscovered species. Undiscovered species of what we'll get into later. But I think what we're going to talk about now is some of the, not conspiracy, but some of the head scratching moments that take place with these carcasses of these animals that are shot, sent off for study somewhere, and then never seen again.
Ooh.
So I will, before, oh God, this is probably going to take up a lot of time. I want to give the most details that I can. I could try and like zoom, like summarize it myself, but I don't want to screw it up. All of this research and all of this order of information does come from cryptozoologist Carl Schuker. He has a blog. He has a very, very long article sorting all of this out that I tried to condense into my notes, and I read it a couple of different times to try and explain what's happening. So here's the story of the Hutton carcass. So originally documented in a 2-page article written by Nairobi-based ornithologist Dr. Gerner Robert Cunningham Van Summeren, and published in the September-October 1981 issue of the East African Natural History Society Bulletin. So Cunningham Van Summeren, also known as Chum, and as I will further be calling him, he was the curator of birds at Kenya's National Museum from 1975 to 1985, but he had a wide knowledge of most African animals and plants and was frequently consulted on matters covering the full spectrum of this continent's wildlife. So his article states that around 1957 or 1958, Douglas Hutton, who was the manager of the Chimomi Tea Estate in the Nandi district, shot 2 specimens of a strange unidentified species of mammal and sent their carcasses to the tea factory, where several members of staff viewed them. During the early 1980s, Chum interviewed 3 of these eyewitnesses independently and received detailed, largely consistent descriptions. So, standing almost 3 feet high at the shoulders, bore a heavy mane of long hair. The creatures had broad, short heads with small ears, broad chests, sloping backs that emphasized their long, heavy forelegs and shorter hind legs and short tails. The only discrepancies that came up when interviewing these eyewitnesses was about the color. So 2 claimed that it was a gray-brown with light tips, and the third stated that it bore black spots with a lighter background color. None had ever seen animals like this before. So he sent the skeletons to the tea factory. Staff viewed them. And then the creature's skeletons had been left in the bush to be cleared by ants. So after Hutton sent them for examination to what was then Nairobi's Corendon Museum, but which in 1964 became Kenya's National Museum within this country's National Museums complex. In the report that he later received from the museum, their species identity had been given somewhat enigmatically. Did I say that word? Enigmatically, yeah, as a giant forest hyena. As for the specimens, like so many others of potentially profound cryptozoological significance, they somehow went missing and never resurfaced. That's the story. But just stand by.
This smells like ringdocus.
Just remember all of that I just said. I'm going to continue with a little bit of different information, but we will be coming back to the Hutton case. So at the end of July 1981, Ken Archer, who was the general manager of Eastern Produce Company and a friend of Hutton, was informed that farmers working on the plots of land on the Nandi escarpment road from Chimil to Nandi had sighted a mysterious animal that they were unable to identify. On the 12th of August, he and Chum visited the farmers to ascertain the animal's appearance and discovered that the description given by one of the observers matched what Hutton had seen back in the late 50s. So that observer denied emphatically that it had been a baboon or a pig and did not think that it was a spotted hyena either. So that's just kind of like another sighting that I'm throwing into this story. Speaking of Ken Archer, Chum claimed that in 1981 he had received a request from Hutton via Archer to investigate at Kenya's National Museum, where Chum was the curator of birds, the mysterious disappearance of Hutton's 2 specimens. So he did this, but he could find no trace or record of them there. He had also at one point had a Nandi Bear sighting himself, Archer did, but I'm not going to mention that right now. What's important is what comes next, which is in the October-November 2009 issue of Old Africa, which is a magazine devoted to recalling East Africa's past and published in Naivasha, which is northwest of Nairobi in Kenya, there was an article written by an Angus F Hutton. Angus F Hutton was actually one and the same as Douglas Hutton, which is the story that I told earlier, who supposedly shot 2 giant forest hyenas and their carcasses went missing. But we find out that the story I told you earlier was incorrect and it was improperly documented or retold. And in this article, Hutton sets the facts straight. So he's a life fellow of the renowned Zoological Society of London, who was well acquainted with the local Nandi fauna. So he opened this article by stating that a few years previously, so again, this article came out in 2009, so a couple years prior to 2009, he had been amazed to find his name linked to a vague report about the shooting of 2 Nandi bears and the skins being lost. He claims it was actually only one that was shot. He shot it with a 38 kpr revolver halfway between the Nandi Bears Club, which is a golf club, and the Chamomi in the bit of forest at the saddle. This is all location information. It doesn't matter. He shot one bear. He was accompanied by the cattle assistant, Harry Toonmer, who had his massive Colt 45 special revolver. And he had actually seen the Nandi bear several times in that same area previously. So he was determined to obtain a specimen of the Nandi bear to end the speculation of what kind of animal it was. So he wasn't necessarily like on a mission, but he was ready. He was like, I've seen this thing before. I'm going to be ready if I see it again. We're going to shoot it. We're going to figure out exactly what it is. So he then sent, I think I made a typo in my notes, or I missed a quote somewhere, because it says I was senior assistant manager and factory manager at Chamomi Tea from, okay, yeah, no, so that's Hutton talking, from 1954 to 1962, and he had numerous discussions with Dr. Louis Leakey about his encounter with the animal. So Dr. Louis Leakey was the Kenya-based paleoanthropologist who's pioneering archaeological work at Old Duvai, George, alongside his wife Mary, revealed many highly significant early human remains, contributing immensely to the knowledge of human evolution in Africa. This is just some background information. And again, I'm almost directly reading from Carl Schuker's blog. I did try to like paraphrase and summarize and stuff like that. But again, I just want to emphasize that all of this information and all of this work was done by Carl Schuker, not me. I'm just relaying the information to everybody reading our podcast. If you'd like to read it in fuller detail, you can go to his blog and read his materials. But again, in this article, Hutton tells the real story of what happened in June 1960, not 1958, not 1959, 1960. He had received a telephone call from his wife concerning that there was a man armed with a long machete who seemed drunk and demented. This is the thing that gets them moving. This is the thing that calls them out of where they were and gets them out into nature as they're traveling. So she's scared. So he's trying to rush home to his wife. So he leaves the club to go home. Then suddenly, as we rounded a bend, there were 2 Nandi bears about 5 yards away on my side of the road, dazzled by the headlights. To me, they both looked like smallish bears standing upright, about 4 to 5 feet in height, till I realized that their front feet were still on the ground, and the animals, in fact, had all 4 feet on the ground. So he's a game hunter. He was a crack shot. So he decided to shoot the larger of the 2 creatures, which severed the spinal cord in its neck. So it dropped dead pretty quick. He didn't want to damage the specimen because the skull could be worth a lot, could tell us a lot. So he was careful there. But as for the smaller one, he said the other animal bolted back into the bush on my side. So Harry was unable to get a shot at it, but he had a good view. We could see how the shoulders sloped back sharply to the rump as it disappeared into the forest. He helped me load the corpse into the back of the wagon, and I was amazed to see what I had shot. The animal was quite like I'm like trying to read so fast. The animal was quite unlike anything I had ever read about or seen before. It had long, shaggy, gingery brown colored hair. I was amazed at the height of its shoulders in relation to its very low hindquarters. It had small rounded ears, its jaw and teeth were massive, and it had a tail very short with a small black tuft on the end. The feet were also black, and the sexual organs were huge and absolutely astounding. The animal
Whoa.
the animal appeared to be both male and female at the same time. And this is
Wow.
important for where we'll come later. So they get back to Hutton's house. The guy who was swinging a machete sees this corpse and like freaks out and leaves. So he's not a problem anymore.
Yeah, right.
So he's attacked. So Hutton's a taxidermist. So he skins and prepares the pelt, dissects the skeletons, buries it in an ant heap for the ants to, clean it up. And he went back to the spot where he'd shot it and took plaster casts of the markings and the footprints that they had left there. So then he calls up Dr. Leaky at the museum to inform him of what had happened. Leakey's excited, tells him to make sure that everything is preserved properly and to send it over. So he sends all of the slides to Leaky and didn't keep any copies for himself. So he's sending everything to Leaky. Well-packaged skeleton delivered personally to Leaky by one of Hutton's friends. He also sent him the skin and the casts, all of which Leaky did receive. And this is acknowledged by him in a typewritten letter to Hutton dated August of 1960. So we know Leaky got all the stuff. In his letter back to Hutton, Leaky makes the following statement saying, "There is no doubt it's a long-haired brown hyena." Now, the long-haired brown hyena is what's nowadays known simply as the brown hyena. And this is kind of going to segue us into possible explanations, but I'm going to power through it and maybe we can revisit it in a little bit because it's important for the way that this all closes up. Because remember, this article that has all of this information was written by Hutton, which is contradictory to what Chum had released and published years prior. So we're trying to reconcile some misinformation here. So the long-haired brown hyena is the fourth species of hyena that's still living today. It's marginally larger than the striped hyena and therefore smaller than the spotted, but both the striped and the brown hyena can readily make themselves look much larger than they actually are by sticking up their hairs to a foot long on their neck and back, which they do during acts of aggression or agitation. So the brown hyena is instantly distinguished from all three of the other modern day hyena species by virtue of its very long, shaggy, dark brown coat and its tall brown and white striped limbs, very large pointed ears, and short, bushy, but fairly inconspicuous tail, which collectively give it somewhat of a bear-like appearance. So if the brown hyena inhabited East Africa, it would make a very plausible Nandi Bear of the giant forest hyena variety, especially if an unexpected encounter with humans caused it to feel threatened and thus erect its neck and back hairs, thereby greatly increasing its perceived stature. However, this species, the rarest hyena alive today, is officially confined entirely to southern Africa. So what's happening here is Leaky is basically saying, hey, it's this kind of hyena, but that kind of hyena isn't supposed to be where it was. Moving right along, I'm going to skip over some of this stuff that I also, just as a side note, Jane Goodall is involved in all of this. She has comments on it too.
Dang.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Blow the whole lid off of this operation.
Right. And just this is just more information about it possibly being a hyena. I've already talked about the fact that it can look like it's standing on its hind legs and whatever. So question that we now have is what happened to Hutton's Nandi Bear specimen after Leaky had identified it as a brown hyena. So due to the significance of it being shot in Southern Africa, or not being shot in Southern Africa, but East Africa, where the species was not supposed to exist, Leaky rightly deemed it to be a very rare and valuable specimen. So Reluctantly, he decided to send it to London's British Museum of Natural History for a full scientific description of it to be prepared there and officially published in the zoological literature. But due to its weight, he elected to send it, as well as all of the slides and the casts, not by air, but instead by sea. But apparently this package never made it to the museum, supposedly. To quote Hutton himself in the article, he says, "Sadly, probably the world's rarest natural history specimen, and the color slides disappeared between Mombasa in England without trace. Who knows, it might still be sailing the seven seas." But the museum has a number of very sizable warehouses containing specimens that have been received but not studied yet or assimilated into the main collections. So there is a possibility that Hutton's specimen and slides and casts did arrive, but was passed on to one of the warehouses and may still be there today, unregistered and uncatalogued. So the mammal curator from the museum at the time, Daphne Hills, had looked at the correspondence on file from 1956 to 1959 in attempts to locate the pieces. So there was like requests for like, hey, can we try and figure out where this went? You know, people are looking into it, whatever. But this was, I think, before Hutton came out with his article. So she's looking in correspondences taking place in the wrong year. She's looking from 1956 to 1959 because that's when Chum said things happened. And so obviously she didn't find anything because she's not looking in the right years. But there could be something between 1960 and 61. And so Carl Schuker himself has actually, and I should note, sorry, I'm getting like so this article that Schuker wrote is fairly recent. It's only a couple months old. Like this is stuff he was looking into this year in 2021. So his blog says that if he hears back from them or if he receives any updates, then he's going to let everybody know because he put in the request to say, hey, it's not in between 56 and 59, check 60 to 61. So we're waiting on that. Don't know if that's going to happen, but that's what's going on. So to sum it all up, for whatever reason, Chum was inaccurate when telling Hutton's story, and Hutton came out years later to say, no, this is what happened. So it's not 2 carcasses that went missing. It's just one. It didn't happen in the 50s. It happened in the 60s. And literally still right now, people are trying to figure out where that specimen is.
Sick.
Wow.
With all of that, Schuker thinks it's a different type of hyena. And I'll put that on pause and I can talk about that a little bit later. But since I've been talking for a while, I'm going to pass it off to you guys. And I'll keep my notes ready for when we get more into explanations of what the Nandi Bear might actually be.
Well, Jasmine's kind of nudging us in the direction of possible explanations. And so I'll just share this one very quickly. I did talk about this a little bit earlier, about it being a misidentified honey badger. And this, a couple people have said this before, but a prominent one that I saw on Wikipedia was paleontologist George Gaylord Simpson.
Da, 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 da.
Yeah, so Mr. Gaylord here says that the Nandi Bear sightings are misidentified honey badgers, which I have a problem with because they do look like mini bears, but one, they're about 10 inches tall at the shoulder, like maximum. So already we're looking at reports of things larger than hyenas. Hutton says 4 to 5 feet tall. The smallest report said 20 inches. So if we're going by the smallest report, the honey badger is half the size of the smallest report of the Nandi Bear. On top of that, the honey badger has a pretty pronounced tail. which all the reports seem to mention that there is no tail, or at the very least, a short tail.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
because I don't know.
Explain the 9 butts on a honey badger too. That's what we want to know. Reports say this thing is THICCC.
Another thing I would like to know before we get into more of these explanations is many times, especially these early reports, mention a comparison to another animal, lion, a hyena, which reason and logic would suggest that if they are comparing it to a hyena or a lion, they know how to properly identify a hyena or lion. So if they're saying that it's bigger than a hyena or that it's not a hyena, maybe it's not a hyena. But we're still going to talk about hyenas right now.
We are.
So, like Jasmine said, the brown hyena would be a perfect match if it actually lived in Kenya, which it doesn't, that we know of.
I just want to tag on a detail to what you just said. So if there were or are indigenous brown hyenas in East Africa, genetic isolation from their Southern African compatriots may have caused an evolution in a larger body size for them. So that would also, heighten the terror of the encounters and make people confused and be like, why are we seeing this? Why is this here? So we're not saying it's impossible that it was a brown hyena. We being the collective, not anybody specific, but just in general, not impossible, but still very, very unlikely.
Mm.
It would be crazy though. Imagine if you mentioned, because genetically, if they are broken off from the original, evolution kicks in. There might be some changes. They get bigger. They have an increase in wanting to eat brains. They just rip the pineal gland right out of the people's skulls and eat it right there.
Oh my.
Imagine if evolution just started changing to where, when things are separated, they just start becoming brain eaters.
Hey, man. Well,
the other
in
there.
Yeah, there's protein, exclusively in the brains of humans. There's nowhere else you can get it from. Another alternative to the brown hyena, one that some would say is probably more likely, is the spotted hyena, which is the largest of the hyenas. So they get up to be 150 pounds, sometimes even reaching 200 pounds.
Ooh.
For comparison, our big boy, I say our, because my family's big boy Creed is 160 pounds, I believe, and is quite a large dog. There's a lot of power there. If he wasn't a love bug, he could probably destroy some fools. So he almost destroyed me yesterday when he jumped on me, and I was like, "Hey, bro, you weigh too much. You can't be doing this. You weigh almost as much as I do. You can't be doing that." So spotted hyenas, some facts here. They are the most social of all hyenas. They have clans of up to 80 members. Also, again, very rare to see a single hyena. They are the most common of all hyena types. And so I guess the argument here is that for the early reports, to say that the Nandi Bear is bigger than a hyena, at least for me, it makes sense that they would be comparing it to the most common of all hyenas, which happens to be the largest of all hyenas, the spotted hyena. So that would make it a very large animal. We're thinking upwards of 150 pounds.
Well, why did I do that? Well, continuing with information about spotted hyenas, in Shuker's opinion, that is the specimen that Hutton saw and shot. And this is why. I apologize in advance that we're going to be talking not at length, but I'm bringing it up again. So Hutton made the comment about the sexual organs appearing both male and female at the same time. This this is something that can be seen or misconstrued with the spotted hyena, because the female spotted hyenas do have sort of enlarged sexual organs. And I'm not going to go into graphic detail. Shuker does that on his blog, but I'll just keep it simple by saying it is possible, if you're looking at a female spotted hyena, to be like, that looks weird.
Looks
They
like
got
a
lot-
dingus.
They got a lot going on down there with those
They
9
do.
butts.
They do. The spotted hyena shows the most extreme form of sexual monomorphism, which means the sexes look similar, evidenced by any mammal. So females could be misidentified as males or misidentified as being both at the same time. So thinking that the specimen that Hutton shot being a female also makes sense, because he shot the larger of the two, and the females of the spotted hyena are larger than the males. So this also makes sense. So these are kind of the two main reasons that Shuker thinks what Hutton shot was a spotted hyena.
Neat.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
And like I said, if you want further detail or you want more like scientific evidence for why he thinks that can all be found on his blog.
I dig it.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Yeah. Animal biology is freaky.
It is. But now let's move to some of the more out there theories, shall we?
Uh-huh.
Dang, that's kind of a bummer though. That fits too perfectly with my favorite theory on what it could be. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Anyways, so what if the Nandi Bear is actually a bear? The question arises, have there ever been bears in Africa? Yes. In Kenya? Yes. But so the most recent bear to live in Africa was known as the Atlas bear, and that lived like very north, like Morocco, kind of like north of is it the Sahara Desert? I think.
Sure.
Yeah. So it lived way up there, like towards the Mediterranean Sea, and they were used by the Romans for gladiator fights and later as an execution method.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Jeez.
Yeah, it's pretty metal, but they kind of took too many of them. And so there wasn't a whole lot. And by the time the 19th century rolled around and guns were invented, the last ones were hunted down in Morocco. So the Atlas bear is no more, unfortunately.
Hunted to extinction in the 1800s.
However, there is another bear that once lived in Africa, and this is known as the Agriotherium africanum. This is probably the largest bear to have ever lived, and its bones have been found in Kenya. The Agriotherium africanum, I wish there was a shorter name for it, but it lived about 12 to 2 million years ago. So there's a little bit of
So I was hanging out with those Romans, eh?
maybe a little bit before them. So it weighed about 2,000 pounds, had long arms and a short snout. It is also the only bear to inhabit Africa south of the Sahara. So, in fact, that's actually a pretty interesting wormhole I kind of fell down, is why bears don't exist in Africa. Because, I mean, there's plenty of other apex predators. There's plenty of food. The going theory is that there's too many large cats. The lions were too much competition for bears, and cats just won out against the bears. I mean, you got to think, lions tend to be pack animals. They're able to secure food more easily than a single, like a rogue bear, you know, because that's how bears hunt. But anyways, so if that is an explanation, the Agriotherium africanum, I mean, both of these, the Atlas bear too, if it somehow managed to get its way to Kenya, would make it a Lazarus taxon. However, the problem with the largest bear to ever live, being the Nandi bear, is that it is too large to fit the reports. Is like just It would be a lot bigger. Like, I mean, a lot bigger than a hyena. It's
Like it's a what, prehistoric bear?
yeah, it's
So it's like because they talk about, oh, what if the Mapinguari could have been a prehistoric sloth, because sloths back then were the size of elephants. So I can
Mhm.
only imagine how massive this bear is roaming around prehistoric Africa, fighting dinosaurs, eating saber-toothed tigers, climbing up volcanoes. Kind of like the Ice Age movies.
So this brings us to our most out there theory. It's not even that out there though. But this is another extinct animal, and I'm not even joking. It is called the Dinopithecus, which is the largest baboon to have ever lived.
Whoa.
And so the largest baboon today weighs about 70 pounds max. This weighed about 100 pounds, and that's a conservative estimate. So most likely it weighed more than that. It was omnivorous, and it lived until about 11,000 years ago. And also its bones are found in Kenya. So again, location matches. But there's a couple of things that I pointed out earlier that are going to come up now. It all comes back. So it would be more robust than modern baboons. The snout. So one of the most significant things about a baboon is that you notice its snout kind of has an inward indentation that goes back out. The Dinopithecus didn't have that indentation. Instead, the snout went straight out. So it would look bear-like in the sense that there was no grooves, you know? We talked about the scalping. Scalping happens to people who have been attacked by chimpanzees. So it's an ape-like characteristic. As far as it taking that child, this could also work with that, because certain apes like gorillas and stuff have been known to kidnap women. Specifically, baboons have been known to sexually assault women, which is pretty nuts.
Dude, baboons are scary.
Yeah.
They're like, because chimpanzees are, you always hear stories, where they rip people apart and they're pretty aggressive, and then you just take a baboon and amplify that by 11.
Yeah.
They're pretty terrifying.
Right. If it was like most baboons nowadays, it would be walking around on all fours until it stood up. And there's a couple of reports of it standing on its hind legs, in which case it would be totally plausible for it to do so. I mentioned in Major Tolson's report, he mentioned seeing the white stripe on its back. And as we know, silverback gorillas, I know that's not a baboon trait, but it is an ape trait. So is it possible that this baboon that was closer in size to a gorilla could have had a similar trait, where it had a silver streak going down its back? I think so. And actually, Bernard Heuvelmans suggested that it could be a giant baboon back in 1955, before they found the Dinopithecus. So
Wow.
It's pretty interesting, because he suggested that, I think from what's his name, Hitchens report, that I think it was it on top of the hut at one point?
I don't think it was on top of, he was in a tent.
Yeah, you're right. He was
in a tent. And
But either
got
way,
tangled up in it.
I think there's a couple of reports that maybe we didn't bring up, or maybe we sped through, to where the Nandi Bear is on top of a hut of some kind. And another way to explain that would be, it's a baboon. It can get up there. However, again, it's a Lazarus taxon. Also, another problem with that theory is that baboons have tails. I don't think we know if Dinopithecus had a tail or not. I don't think we found a complete skeleton of one. So, I mean, it's possible that it didn't have a tail and was more like a gorilla or a chimpanzee, but again, we don't know. So I mean, it would certainly match the size descriptions, possibly color descriptions, behavior wise. Oh, yeah. Going back to the story of the Kodolo and that whole tribe that left their village. That's primate behavior 101. They'll encroach and see how much they can get away with until they take over. You know, there's like stories that come from Africa where people have to fight troops of baboons from their like farms.
Jeez.
Because they'll just want to take over.
That's crazy.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
I know. Yeah, baboons are scary, dude.
They are.
They're
The only baboon I trust is Rafiki.
Rafiki.
The only baboon I trust is IR baboon.
It's from Cow and Chicken, right?
Oh yeah. I am Weasel and IR baboon. But yeah, it's kind of. Could you imagine if we had to, like, in our modern day, had to fight off militarized baboons who kept trying to take over our hometown?
Dude, yeah. And imagine them being like weighing as much as you, like being over 100 pounds. Like, that's scary. It's all right, and they're coming. They're gonna take our house. All right, everyone, we gotta fight these monkeys. Yeah.
There's a couple more kind of Lazarus taxon theories as well. We've got a couple different prehistoric hyena species that it could be attributed to, as well as I even wrote out the pronunciation of this animal, but still don't know what it's supposed to be. Possibly it's pronounced Kalika Athir, which was a broad-shouldered relative of the rhinoceros and horse, but this was an herbivore creature. Archaeological reconstructions of the animal reveal a beast with the head and ears of a bear, but the body close to a giant hyena. Their bones were found in areas around East Africa, offering some weight to the theory. But for it to have been one, it would have had to have remained undiscovered in the valley until the 19th century. So quite a few prehistoric possibilities floating around. Obviously, we've talked so much about hyenas. So yeah. And then the last theory, which also is kind of a suggestion that also came from Heuvelmans. He said the morphological descriptions recorded for it are so varied that no single species could conceivably reconcile all of them. In other words, it could be possible that there is no single Nandi Bear identity, and that in reality, this cryptid is instead a composite created by the erroneous lumping together of reports describing several different animal species.
Could be.
Well,
that's what I got, y'all.
Yeah. Well, I actually had one pop culture reference.
Me too. Yeah? I wonder if it's the same one.
It probably is. Tarzan comics?
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah. So apparently Gold Key Comics I guess it was included in 2 issues. 1963 in Tarzan number 134, titled The Hunting of the Beast, features Tarzan battling with the Nandi Bear.
Wow.
And then it shows up again, right? In The Son of Tarzan?
Yeah.
To where he's what's his name? Tarzan's son? It's like
Korok,
yeah.
I think.
He saves a tribe of small people from the Nandi Bear.
Yeah.
Whoa. Crazy old Tarzan stories.
Yeah. And that's all I got for that.
Yeah. That is all I got too. Although I'll say I didn't specifically go searching for pop culture references just because everything else was so like deep. There was so much other stuff. I was like, I gotta figure this out. I've got to figure out what happened with Hutton and Chum.
Chum.
And I still don't know why Chum was so wrong. I think it one of the theories that it could have just been he just wasn't that interested. Like it was just oh, I'm doing this just to do it. And it could have been disinterest. So disinterest in the actual incident could have been why he made all of the mistakes. But yeah, don't know.
Chum at it again.
Old chum, the chum bucket.
I found something random. I think we're coming to a close.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna send it to you guys because it's a little bit of pulp culture for the Nandi Bear.
Let me see it.
It's weird because it comes through this like weird feature on it. When you guys get the picture.
Oh
Send
yeah.
it to the chat. Where it's a cyclops.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Cyclops.
So this is I guess in the mid 90s or something. It was called Monsters of the Mind or Weird and Wild Creatures, and there were like trading cards that were released with different myths and monsters. They have one about the Nandi Bear, and it's a picture. It looks kind of like a hyena. It's got one eye, and it's just jumping at the camera. And it says, some reports say that Nandi bears have one eye in the middle of their head like a cyclops. When one of the beasts focuses its evil eye on a victim, that person has little chance of escaping, which is contradictory to every report what you guys told me.
Hey, it's extreme.
Yeah, it's funny too because it says, according to legend, the Nandi Bear is a beastly murderer that has long been a terror of East Africa. Like overgrown and angry hyenas, these monsters are feared for their vicious attacks, which usually lead on them feasting on the brains of their human victims. Many believe the creatures are real and may be ultraviolet animals that have survived undetected for thousands of years. It's like, whoo, sounds kind of scary. Maybe we should do something about that, huh?
No, I think it's fine, dude.
Yeah, right?
He's chill.
I mean, just traveling, going to Africa, and you meet some people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we have these giant bears, the hyenas. They eat people's brains." It's just like, wow, that's crazy. We don't have that anywhere else. In fact, we have normal bears everywhere else in the world. Like, what? What do you mean? We got stuck with the brain-eating ones.
That are cyclopses, apparently.
Yeah, give me a break already.
Could you imagine if every report was like specifically mentioning like I counted it had 2 eyes,
Right?
like that wasn't the norm. Like
Yeah, that would be funny.
Unfortunately, this trading card doesn't describe the 9 butts, but
Yeah.
what are you gonna do?
butts, dude. Just look for the 9 turds, dude.
Follow the trail. And that bombshell. I think that's about it, huh, guys?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I think there's not much else on the Nandi Bear. I mean, there is, but we ain't gonna cover that today. And but if you guys are checking out the show, you guys, how do I transition here? You guys can, if you guys are listening to the show, you guys can watch us on YouTube now via the Paranormal Network on YouTube. So please subscribe to them. Give us a thumbs up on the YouTube video.
Yeah,
Hopefully,
like, comment, subscribe.
yes. Hopefully we don't look ugly.
Yeah. If you think so, keep it to yourself. I don't need that negativity in my life.
Yeah. If you've done that, check us out at our website. That's cryptidcampfire.com, where you can get yourself an exclusive t-shirt. Also, follow us on social media. That's at Cryptid Campfire on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Furthermore, if you've done all those things and you still need more, subscribe to our Patreon page. $5 a month. It gets you access to exclusive episodes, as well as wallpapers designed by our very own Alexander Daikaiju.
And I'm making kind of a spooky October one for this time.
Ooh, I'm stoked out of my mind. Anyways, Alex, speaking of your wonderful artwork, where can I go online to find you?
Yeah, if you want to find me, Alex Daikaiju, I'm on Instagram at Alex DAIKAIJU. Post a lot of monster cryptid related artwork. Right now, at the time of recording, we're in October, so I'm doing a daily drawing challenge. So be sure to check that out. I hope I don't fall. Going for 31 days. And my sources today, awkwardly enough, was a podcast called Cryptid Campfire. I was there listening the whole time. I learned all the sources. It was great. So check them out. Oh, wait, that's us. And speaking of us, taking it away, hailing from Ohio, I have a theory going on that people born from Ohio can shoot laser beams out of their eyes, but they just don't want to tell us. So, Jasmine, we'll put those things back and tell it get away.
Yes. If you guys want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, my name is the same on both. It's Jasmine Maywith, JasmineMaywith. My sources today came from Paranormal, encyclopedia.com, The Active Times, Times of India, oddly enough, a website that I'm assuming is called Uwa or Owa, but it's spelled OWAAHH.com. Carl Schuker's blog spot, that article posted this year, Occult World, and I did use Mysterious Universe today.
Very nice. Good laundry list. And I don't even know how to begin. Last week we had a little bit of a debacle. Try to do a little funny joke, set off a whole international scene. Don Cheadle, we're trying to get a hold of him. If anyone knows, let us. We got to know. But in the meantime, here's the Eli Watson.
Indeed. Hello, everyone. My name is Eli Watson, and you can follow me at the Eli Watson on Instagrams. My sources for today are the Cryptid Wiki, Wikipedia, cryptidarchives.fandom.com, which is like a superior version of the Cryptid Wiki.
They dropped the Z.
They did, and added archives. The YouTuber Bob Gimlin, and that's GYMLAN, not GIM, and owa.com. Owa.
Owa.
And I think that's how we're ending it. Owa.
Owa.
This
Owa.
episode's Owa.
Owa. Thank guys for listening. I hope you were able to follow Alex. I hope you learned a lot this episode as being, our listener.
It was amazing. I love this podcast. I can't wait for more.
Yeah. How was this experience? Because for those of you who don't know, originally what Alex did today was supposed to be what I did all the time, was just come in and be the third person who didn't know anything and just kind of learn as we went. How was that experience today?
I feel like my third eye's been open and I can see forever and forever. Ah!
This podcast is a part of Straight Up Strange Productions. Discover more shows like this one at straightupstrange.com.